Welcome back, it's Eddie here from Tyneside Life, and I am super excited today because yesterday I found out that English Heritage were having a couple of open days to allow members of the public to come here on top of the Dunston Staiths. I've been dying to come on here for absolutely ages now. You might be asking, what's a Staith? Well, a Staith is usually some sort of wooden structure, contraption, usually on the side of a river, sometimes built into a river and used to facilitate the transportation of coal from coal pits down to the river onto a Staith and then loaded onto a boat or ship and transported off into other destinations. Now this particular Staith, the Dunston Staith, was the biggest one that was ever built in the River Tyne. Back in the day there was about 31 Staiths up and down the River Tyne of all sorts of different sizes and dimensions, and this one was built into the River Tyne directly opposite the old Armstrong and Elsick works and opened in 1893. I should say a couple of weeks ago I released a video about Newcastle's West End, about the birth and the growth of the Industrial Revolution on there by Lord William Armstrong when he first opened up his first factory, the Armstrong Works in Elsick in 1847. I won't go into any more detail, check the video out, I'll leave a link at the end of this video. So a bit of background: before a Staith like this was built for hundreds of years in this area, going back to the 1600s, about 400 years, coal was being mined in pits and the coal was being transported down to the River Tyne, usually on small boats called keels with the coal on, come down to the river. The coal was then shoveled onto small boats and taken down the River Tyne and transported off to other destinations. What changed is 1876, further down the river where the bridges are, the old Georgian Bridge was taken down and the new swing bridge, designed and built by Lord William Armstrong, was put there in its place to allow big ships to come up and down the Tyne, because the Elsick Works, Armstrong Works just across there, was in its heyday and there were battleships and submarines and all sorts of things being built there. There was a hive of activity, and this provided the opportunity for obviously bigger boats and ships to come down the Tyne for coal transportation to be loaded here. So in 1893 they opened up the Dunston Staith. Now this one, a bit different from the other Staiths on the side of a river. This one was built into the river to allow ships to come either side, but also in addition it allowed coal steam trains to come from the Durham pits, come along the top of the deck of the Staith here, and the coal would be tipped out either through chutes in the deck to go down below, where a trimmer, a man, would then help the coal be levelled off into the boat or ship to be transported off. Or they use these big cranes on the side here, well not cranes actually, they're conveyor belts, which would lower down onto bigger ships, and the conveyor belt would take the coal through a different type of chute and to be loaded onto the ship. So I've just spent about 20 minutes chatting to Tony, who's one of the Newcastle city guides, who's been telling me about the history of the Staiths and everything that went on in this area. It's been absolutely fascinating listening to him, and he's been describing what it would have been like for the men working in these sort of environments with the coal on these huge Staiths. You had the teamers, the men who would be on the top of the coal trucks on top of the train, who would open up the hatch so that the coal could go down into the chutes through the board or onto the conveyor belts. Sometimes if the coal was getting clogged up, they had to climb on top of the wagon and jump on it. Sometimes they had to set the coal on fire underneath to help try and loosen it up to allow it to go down the chutes. And you had the trimmers, the men who were down below where the coal was being poured into the boat or the ship to prevent the boat or ship from tipping. The trimmers had to shovel the coal to even it off, and you can just imagine the back-breaking work. There was no health and safety then in all conditions. He says there would have been all sorts of accidents and fingers being lost and legs being broken. Men, he said, fell over the side because these railings weren't here back then. These were put up for the 1990 Garden Festival. What a place this would have looked like from the 1890s onwards, the activity and the back-breaking work of the transportation of coal from Newcastle, especially to London, one of our biggest customers, but also to other cities around Europe. it just would have been absolutely amazing. Now, I've just been chatting to a couple of elderly ladies who were passing, because I heard that one of them, her granddad, spent most of his, or all of his working life working on the Dunston Staith, and he was called William Lynch, and she was telling us about the life that these men had. He was a trimmer, which I was just mentioning earlier. He said he was well paid, and actually all the men who worked on here were really well paid. And she said, it was in the late 40s sometime when he was 65, he come in, he was broken hearted because he was told that he had to retire. But she told us that after his shift working on the Dunston Staiths, he used to go down to the Dunston Excelsior, have a couple of pints and then walk to Bensham where he lived. Fascinating. And for about 50 or 60 years, this was a really successful operation. But going into the 1960s, the 70s in particular, the coal industry began to decline, and in 1980 saw the last use of the Dunston Staith to put coal onto boats and ships. Now, apart from 1990, where we had the Garden Festival and the Dunston Staiths was spruced up a bit with these fencing, etc., and the conveyor belts were painted blue, the Dunston Staiths has had a bit of an unlucky existence, because over the last 20 years or so, it's been attacked by arsonists 4 times with some catastrophic results. A huge section of the middle section of the Dunston Staith is actually burned down in 2003, but it was also attacked again in 2019 and 2020. What possesses thick-skulled idiots to think it's a good idea to come down to monuments and structures like this, where men built this area, and just want to burn the thing down? I can't get my head around it. So today the bridge is owned by the registered charity, the Tyne and Wear Building Preservation Trust. I think I've got that right. And they work with other partners to try and keep the place renovated where they can. They are charities, they try and raise money so they can have open days like this. They work in partnership with the Friends of the Dunston Staiths, who were also part of the Staiths Cafe as well, English Heritage and the National Trust. Now actually the National Trust are here as well, and earlier on I spoke to a girl called Lucy who's got something to tell us.
Hello, my name's Lucy Zwolinska. I work for the National Trust as part of the Tyne Derwent Way, of which the beautiful Dunston Staiths that we're standing on today is part of. The Tyne Derwent Way is launching today. It's a 9-mile route from the heart of Gateshead, along the River Tyne and up the River Derwent all the way to Gibbside, and it is just waiting for you to come and explore nature, heritage and culture along the way.
Thanks Lucy, and make sure you check out the Tyne Derwent Way and grab yourself a cup of coffee and some cake in the Staiths Cafe when you're on it. I forgot to mention that just to the west of the Dunston Staiths there was an island in the middle of the River Tyne in front of more or less St Stephen's Church in Elsick, and it was called King's Meadow. It was a huge island, actually had a pub on it. I think it was called the Duchess of Coventry or something like that, and there were 2 smaller islands, but the name of those 2 islands escape us at the moment. So look, if you'd like to get involved in the Dunston Staiths out of interest or its upkeep or making donations, just Google Dunston Staiths, you'll be able to follow the links and get involved in some way as well. And Tony from City Guides, if you're watching, I apologise because I wouldn't have done what you told me any justice whatsoever. If you'd like a tour with Newcastle City Guides, check their website is out as well, because there's about 60 of them and they do walks all over this particular area. So there you go, a bit of an impromptu video. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it informative. If you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, and as well, if you want to subscribe and hit that bell so every time I release a new video you'll get a notification. So thanks for watching. I'm going to head back there to the Dunston Staiths Cafe and have myself a bit of cake and a coffee.